Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Meetup Live event. My name is Emily. I'm the events marketing intern here at Meetup. And today we are joined by special guest Sarah Nisbett, founder of Drawn on the Way, to learn how to incorporate drawing into your daily routine. Sarah will lead some exercises with tips to get started and finding inspirations from your surroundings. Learn why drawing is a trusted method for stress relief, improved mental health, and activating creativity. The workshop is open to beginners and seasoned artists alike. So if you guys want to follow along, just make sure you have a pen or a pencil and a sketchbook or a few sheets of paper. So before we start, I'm just going to share a few slides with the agenda and the guidelines. So this event is recorded, but don't worry, you will not appear in the video. You can only see us, we can't see you. And there's also a mute courtesy. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, just be sure to put it in the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to answer that at the end. Closed captioning is also available. To turn it on, you can just click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preferences from there. For today's agenda, we're just doing quick introductions, which is right now, for 5 minutes, and then Sarah will take it away with her demo and lecture for 45 minutes, and then we'll do a quick Q&A session at the end for 10 minutes. So before we get into it, I'm just gonna introduce Sarah to everybody. So Sarah is a former professional opera singer who learned how to draw by sketching strangers during her daily commute on the New York City subway. A totally self-taught artist, she turned her hobby of drawing on the way into a successful Instagram account and blog. Her Drawn on the Way project is dedicated to helping people find the extraordinary and everyday, and to see themselves and those around them as a work of art. Through her expressive and minimal illustrations and paintings, Sarah is creating a movement of self-acceptance and awareness, showing people that when you make art about the world, you make the world yours. So I can't wait to see what you have for us and to learn so much from you. So I'll let you take it away, and I won't take up any more of your time. But I'll be back for Q&A at the end.
Awesome, cool. Well, I'm gonna kick it off. Hello, everyone. I'm gonna start sharing my screen here. So give me a moment to get that all set. And all right, hopefully you can see my screen now. Cool. So yes, hello. My name is Sarah Nisbett, and I am a self-taught artist, author, and the founder of Drawn on the Way. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Emily. So I started this project accidentally on the New York City subway about 10 years ago, and since then I've drawn over 5,000 strangers, and I've really turned this sort of way to pass the time into a project with a mission to use illustration to inspire people to find the extraordinary in the everyday and see themselves as works of art. So we're going to talk a bit about that today. So today I'm going to share with you some of the most important things that I've learned from this project, and how drawing in the middle of one of the busiest cities and places in the world, the New York City subway, taught me to use drawing as a relaxing way to pause and connect with the world around me. And then we're going to take a moment to do some drawing together so that you can see how easy it is to begin to turn your world into a work of art while you're on the way, and hopefully find more connection and relaxation in your day as you do. So I'm going to start off just by telling you a little bit more about how the project started. As I said, it started accidentally. So as Emily mentioned, I was an opera singer, and that's what brought me to New York. And I did that for many years successfully, and then decided it wasn't really the lifestyle for me, and decided I needed to get a 9-to-5. And so it was during the time when I was actually temping in offices all over the city that I found myself coming home on the train one night, and I just could not stare at another screen for another minute of the day. So I didn't want to take my phone out, and I thought, how am I going to pass the time? And I'd always been a doodler. So kind of instinctively reached for the notebook I had in my bag, and I dug around until I found an office pen that I'd stolen from the supply closet where I was temping. Shh, don't tell. And I took out my sketchbook and I took out this pen and I thought, okay, I'll doodle something. And nothing came to mind. So I kind of started looking around the train thinking maybe something, I'd get some inspiration. And I spotted this man sitting across from me, this older gentleman, wearing a 3-piece rust-colored leisure suit with a matching vest and fedora and this big wide pattern tie. And he just caught my eye, and I just thought, this person's so interesting. He's got to have some kind of story. And he's just this New York character, and he was going into Manhattan when everyone was going home for the night. And I was just like, who is this guy? And I started wondering about him. You know, I wondered who he was when that suit was new, and I wondered who he was now. And as I wondered, I kind of put that curiosity into the form of a drawing, and totally surprising myself, because at the time I knew 2 things. I knew I could not draw from life, and I knew I could not draw people. And so when I finished the drawing and I looked at it, I thought, this actually, you know, this is better than I thought it was going to be. And I'm home. And the time had passed really quickly. So the next morning I got on the train and I thought, I'm going to draw somebody else. And that afternoon I got on the train and I thought, I'm going to draw somebody else. And every single day since then, I have drawn someone or something wherever I am. And so I often say that the subway taught me how to draw, but more importantly, it taught me how to see, and how to bring the background of our lives into the foreground, and how to see the stories that surround us. And that brings me to one of the first lessons that drawing on the subway taught me, which is to look around. You know, as New Yorkers, we're sort of trained to be anonymous out in public. And I think that's true most places in the world, that there's sort of this expectation of anonymity when we move around in public. And that's especially true on the subway. And I saw people checking out in so many ways, you know, hiding behind books and lost in cell phones and tuning out with their headphones in. And in a strange way, the more tuned out they were, the easier it was for me to tune in, because they didn't notice me noticing them. And in noticing them, my ride became more interesting. And I began to notice the little details, you know, the silent ways that people talk about themselves to the world. You know, it might be the funky socks on a seemingly straight-laced banker that says something about who they might be. Or the way somebody, you know, says something about themselves or their philosophy with with what they wear, or like, I don't know if you can read what it says on this patch, but this is one of my favorite folks I saw. This patch says, "Good morning, New York, let's make that money." And I just thought that's like such a New York attitude. I just loved it. Or it might be the way that somebody reveals their profession, because they're literally carrying it with them, like this cellist who's got, you know, her cello on her back. And it's not just the way that we style ourselves that says something about who we are. I began to see that, you know, the way a person holds themselves says something about who they are too. So, you know, the shy way that somebody tucks their feet under the subway bench, or, you know, the elegant, regal way that somebody drapes their hand over their purse. You know, these are such small gestures, but it really speaks to who this person is, or to who they might be. And I say to who they might be because these stories are speculation, right? And they could be wrong, but wondering about the people that you share the world with, your world with, has a profound effect. And especially right now, when we're all, you know, there's a sense of disconnection and isolation, when, you know, we can only see half of somebody's face. It's more important than ever to look up and to be curious about the people that we share this world with. And that's because, you know, the thing I discovered is that when we become curious about the people and the things around us, we wonder about them. And we begin to imagine the lives and stories happening outside of our own. And that is the definition of empathy. You know, empathy is the action of understanding. So you attempt to experience and inhabit the emotions of someone else, and that creates connection. So when you wonder about someone or something, if you're drawing an object, you become connected to them. And so these drawings, which we're going to practice making today, are a tool to focus our curiosity and inspire wonder. And in doing so, when we make these drawings, even if you don't speak to the person you're drawing or you can't talk to the thing that you're drawing, you can feel connected to them. So that first drawing that I shared with you was the beginning of a new way of looking for me. It was using drawing as a way of tapping into the world around me. So these aren't just sketches, they're stories about the people I share my journey with, jotted down in lines of ink instead of text. And by noticing the little moments on the way that happen on the way, you also begin living in them. And that makes the literal journey and the metaphorical journey much more interesting and relaxing and meaningful and calm. And I might not have discovered any of this about the power of simple, quick drawings, made in the moment, if I hadn't started drawing on the subway. Because the subway, it turns out, is actually a really wonderful teacher. And I'm going to share with you the things that the subway taught me, these wonderful teachers that it has that you can actually find anywhere. And those teachers are time, repetition, and mistakes. I say those are the best teachers you can find. And the subway has those in spades, right? So the gift of time. So when you're trying to learn a new skill, time is really important. I lived off of the F train. So I don't know if, I saw some New Yorkers signing in here, and we might have some former New Yorkers as well. But if you know the F train, which is the line that I lived off, it is famous for being late or delayed or both. And that's it's pretty terrible for commuting. But if you're using the train as a kind of art school, it's great. So with my sketchbook in hand, the hours spent waiting on, the platforms or stuck, underground somewhere between Manhattan and Brooklyn, they weren't wasted time. They simply extended my class time. And similarly, there's a lot of time, but you actually often don't have a lot of time to draw the person across from you because you never know when they're leaving. And that taught me, you can't predict when somebody's going to get up and leave you in the middle of a portrait. So that taught me that you can actually express a lot with a little, which was a huge relief. And I think that's something you're going to see me talking about a lot today, is the ways that we can kind of shift how we see the practice of drawing and the purpose of drawing to kind of create connection and relaxation and sort of take out some of these expectations that I think we bring with us that can make creativity a stressful thing instead of something that's really powerfully engaging. So another teacher is repetition. And for me, because drawing was linked to my daily routine, getting practice was easy to the point of being unavoidable, because my commute was my default time to practice. And there's, I think, about 5.5 million people that ride the subway on a normal day. So I had infinite opportunities to practice again and again until that constant repetition gave way to the beginnings of skill. So drawing from life gave me this inexhaustible source of inspiration, along with the confidence that if I first I don't succeed, I'll have to try again on the ride home. So we'll talk about that today, how that repetition can help us in drawing from life. And that brings me to another important lesson that the subway taught me. It's a bumpy ride, so you gotta embrace your mistakes. As I said, I've made over 5,000 portraits with just an ordinary office pen. And I am so glad I pulled that pen out of my purse on that first commute, because it taught me, along with the very bumpy ride of the train, to embrace my mistakes. Because without an eraser, if you're working without an eraser, each line really becomes an act of bravery. Without an eraser, there's no going back. So when it comes to the work at hand, there are only 3 choices, right? You can accept what you've made as good and move on, or you can turn the page and start over, or you can try and work with your mistakes and turn them into something you like. And of course, these are the constraints of working in pen when you're drawing from life. But they really, if you think about it, they kind of mirror the choices that we have at any given moment in life. And as funny as it sounds, that kind of forced boldness of using a pen helped me to see that mistakes are opportunities for discovery and innovation. And I say this as someone who is a recovering everyday perfectionist, and I use really drawing as almost like a form of like exposure therapy for myself to kind of practice making mistakes. So I want to tell you the story of one of my favorite drawings that really represents that idea of mistakes being important to make. So I was riding the train one day. It was early in the morning. I was on my way to work, and I was drawing this woman sitting across from me, and she had this just like perfectly elegant bob. Like it was just so smooth and sleek. Like my hair will never do that. And I was looking at her, and I started drawing her, and I had this portrait, and I was almost done, and it was like so elegant and minimal. I'd used like 5 lines, and I was so proud of myself, and having a great time. And I was about to add the final line, and as I went to make the last mark, I just watched my hand like bump across the page, and I was like, what just happened? And I realized that the person who was sitting next to me and getting into their seat, they bumped my arm. And my first thought was like, excuse me, you're in my studio and you have just disrupted me and ruined the best drawing I've ever made in my life. And I was like, wait a minute, this is the subway. I need to get a hold of myself. And I kind of looked at this drawing and I thought, okay, I really don't want to start again because I really like this drawing. And moreover, I don't even have time to because my stop is the next stop. So I kind of sat there and thought, what can I do? How can I fix this? How can I work with this? And so I looked at this wobbly line and I just made another one next to it and another one until I kind of had this eclectic, electric little tangle of lines that you see here on the screen. And at the end, I had a different drawing than I had planned, but I had one that I actually liked a lot better. And I started using this technique to draw hair whenever I could. And I looked for any opportunity to draw patterns and stripes with lines that kind of took this imperfect wild route across the page. And so this drawing is a mistake, yes, but working with that mistake taught me a lot. And it seems really silly, I'm talking about these little drawings, but they have a lot of power if you give them that. And you know, so this little drawing and the mistake that made it taught me a lot, you know, that the more you fail, the more you realize that mistakes are instructional and not fatal. And I always tell people to draw in pen because it means you have to be bold and confident, even if you aren't feeling that way. So practicing that day in and out, you know, day in and day out on the safe space of your notebook has an effect on the rest of your life. And that brings me to one of the next lessons that this project in drawing has taught me, which is to enjoy the ride, you know, process over product. So when I first started drawing on the subway, after a few weeks of doing that, I was just hooked. I was having the best time. I would step on the train and the first thing I would do, I'd reach for my sketchbook, I'd uncap my pen and I'd let my eyes wander over the crowd. And it was, you know, it was reflexive and it was my absolute favorite part of the day. But things sort of quickly changed from pure joy to a mix of emotions because, you know, I loved how I felt when I was drawing. But then when I stopped to look at what I had drawn, I didn't feel great. And I'm sharing some of those first drawings here, and I'm sharing them bravely, but also proudly because I see the artist that I was becoming in them, and I see things about them that I think are wonderful. But at the time, I thought the only worthwhile way to recreate the world was to do it with perfect fidelity. And so I was disappointed in my wobbly lines and scratchy sketches, and almost to the point where I was really ready to give up and just say, I'm never going to be able to do this. And that is the moment that I had to figure out how to follow the joy, because on the one hand, I loved it. And on the other hand, I was feeling really bad about it. I really wanted to follow that feeling of the joy. So one day I was drawing and I was feeling really frustrated by my sketch, and I had this epiphany that prompted me to kind of say to myself, okay, you were an art history major, right? So you know that art isn't about perfectly recreating, what you see. We celebrate Da Vinci and Picasso and Van Gogh and Michelangelo because they recreated the world as they saw it. So if you do the same, aren't you following in the footsteps of the greatest artists? and kind of shifting that mindset. From that moment on, I decided that, maybe I was the next Picasso. And even if I wasn't, what was the worst thing that was going to happen if I treated my work as if I was? So instead of stopping, I started focusing on expressing a view of the world as I saw it and as I could make it in that moment. So a drawing was good if I felt good making it. A drawing was good if it made me feel the way I felt when I looked at that person. A drawing was good if I felt like I told someone's story. So it's really important to uncouple the product from the process and redefine what good art is. And we are going to practice that in just a little bit. And that is where that relaxation is going to come in, when you can do that. Because once I realized that, once you realize you can evaluate your work by the joy of making it, not how good it is, you become free. Making art feels good. So enjoy it. If I'd let my inner critic tell me to stop, I would not be here right now talking to you. And I would have robbed myself of years of joyful connection and calm. As a very anxious person, I find drawing a very calming thing. And that joyful connection brings me to the final lesson I'm going to share about this project before we start doing some drawing together. So when I can, I gift my sketches to the person I've drawn. And this small act of sharing really counters the anonymity of the city or wherever I am, if I'm in a new place or an old place. Because sharing really multiplies the joy of creating. And you'll see the power of what you've made, which is a version of the world that has the ability to move or inspire or delight. And I promise that no matter what it looks like, no matter what you make here today, what it looks like, or what you make in the future, there is power in that. And here's one final story just to illustrate that point. So I don't often get to hear what happens to my portraits once I've given them away. But this particular story I did learn, and it reminds me why, being a visual storyteller, which is what I consider myself, what I'm going to share with you guys today, how to see for yourselves, why it's so important. So I was riding the train home one night on a rainy day, and if you have ever been in New York when it's rainy, it is a particular kind of miserable, and the subway is like another level of misery on a rainy day. Like everybody is just a drowned rat, and it's just like humid and soggy and dripping, and it's bad. And I was on the train, and I was one of those soggy drowned rats and just feeling pretty miserable and looking at a sea of miserable faces. And as I was kind of looking around for someone to draw, I saw this woman wearing a beautiful fedora hat. I guess I love a hat. I'm a hat fan. And she just looked so calm and collected and like elegant and just unaffected. And so I started drawing her. And I really felt like when I finished the drawing, I was like, got to make sure I give this to her. So before she got off the train, I managed to, dash off the sketch and hand it to her, and gave her my card. At the time, I didn't have a card. I just wrote my username down in a piece of paper and handed it to her. And that was it. She walked away, and that was it. And then months later, I got an email from her, and she was writing to say, the day that you drew me, I was having a bad day in the middle of a bad week, in the middle of a bad month, and I was not feeling very confident in myself, and I was feeling pretty down and beating myself up pretty badly mentally. And when you handed me this piece of paper with my portrait on it. It was the confidence booster that I needed. And at the time when I would share my drawings on social media, I would share them with a title. So this one I had titled Weather the Storm. And she said, the portrait together with the title had just been kind of one of those moments, and these are her words, that, one of those smallest gestures kind of restores your faith in humanity and in yourself again. And, so I share this because, her experience in that moment and my imagined story were different, but there was truth to what I saw, somebody weathering the storm with grace and elegance and resilience, even though in that moment she felt battered by it. And by sharing that image with her that day, I reminded her of the truth about herself. And I think I could have done that with the best drawing in the world. And, the drawing that I made, it wasn't about, the perceived quality of it. It was about the gesture and the feeling behind it. And the joy of that connection, it stays with me today. It reminds me to keep doing this, and it's in every drawing I make. So that's the joy of observational drawing, is that it transforms everyday moments into something more. And we're about to practice that, because we're so often fixated on getting where we're going that we think of all the steps to get there as sort of lost time. But truly, these on the way moments are the stuff of life. How many hours have you spent on the subway or in transit or waiting for the next meeting to start on Zoom, and how many of those hours were you impatiently biding your time, racing to get to the next thing? And imagine how different that time could be if you tuned into the world around you. If you allow yourself to be present, you'll see you'll see the world come alive with thousands of stories. So, we're always in transit, and on the way is not a place, it's an ever-shifting point from which we begin again and again. And there's always another page to turn, and new chapters to write, and sketchbooks to fill. So it is worth taking a brief pause to enjoy the view, which is what we are about to do together now. So now that you know a little bit more about how drawing from life can change your life and bring lots of lovely things into it, I think we should do some drawing together. So to join in on this part, you just need a pen or a pencil and a few sheets of paper. They can be loose paper, or they can be attached to a sketchbook. Anything is fine, doesn't have to be fancy paper at all. And what we're going to do today is we're going to find some ways to get creative without inviting our inner critic along for the ride. So today we are not going to use our erasers. So if you have a pencil, you're only going to be using one end of it because we're not worried about making mistakes. We're just going to go with the flow. And for our first drawing today, to practice focusing on the process, we're going to draw without looking at the page. That might sound a little scary or hard, but I promise you it is fun and easy. This kind of drawing is called a blind contour drawing. And to make sure we really don't peek while we're drawing, we are going to make what I call a shield of creative faith to protect us from judgment. Because if we can't see what we're doing, then we can't judge what we're doing. And sometimes we need a little help with that. So to make your shield of creative faith, you are going to take a sheet of paper. And if you have a sketchbook, just go ahead and tear one out. And if you've got loose paper, great, you're all set. You're going to take your pen or your pencil. It's a very, very high-tech piece of equipment we're going to make here, patent pending. You're going to take your pen or pencil, and you're just going to stab it into the middle of the paper, being careful not to stab yourself, of course. And when you do that, you should have something that looks like this. And as you can see, if I were to try and draw something, I would not be able to see what I was drawing. So if you have made something that looks like this, then congratulations, you have made a shield of creative faith. And you can go ahead and set that aside for a minute because before we make a blind contour drawing, I think we should first talk about what a contour drawing is. So here you have some. You're looking at a couple contour drawings that I made. So it's a really, really simple style of drawing. You probably recognize this. You've probably seen drawings that look like this. And contour drawing is just a technique where you're focusing on outlining the shape or the contours, contour being a fancy French word for for outline, outline of your object. So in this technique, you don't add minute details or shading. Instead, you're just focusing on capturing the general exterior shape of your object and maybe a few, suggestive details from the interior as well. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what I mean. So you can see on the page here, I've drawn this paintbrush. And you can see I've just made a really, really simple outline of the shape of this paintbrush. And I could have just stopped there and that would have been a contour drawing. But I went ahead and I added a few more contours to define this paintbrush a little bit more. So I paid attention to those topographies, places where, the shape of my object changed. So I added the contour lines to kind of denote this little place where, the end of the brush is clamped onto the, what do you call this? Handle. And, this little ridge here where this is clamped on, and I drew some of the bristles there, the contours of those. So I added some of the contours of those like internal topographies as a way of thinking about it, but you don't have to do that at all. And similarly, I've got a contour drawing of some books here. And I could have just drawn a rectangle because that's the contour, that's the outline, that's the shape of a book, very simple. But because I think it's fun, I added the titles and the artwork on the spines. But again, don't have to do that. It's very, very simple contour drawings. So how do you make a contour drawing? If you've ever made a tracing of your own hand, I think a lot of us did that like in elementary school, you traced your hand. It's kind of the same process that you used for making that. But instead of physically running your pen, alongside each of your fingers and around your palm, you're gonna trace that path with your eyes, and you're gonna use your pen to map the course that they take. So the resulting outline of your hand would be a contour drawing. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could add a few interior contours, right? Like the details of the nails or the folds of the skin at the knuckles. So if you need a guide for your contour drawings, you can just imagine like an ant walking along the outside of your object. And if you just trace that imaginary path, that would be a contour drawing. So that's another good way to think about how to do it. And, contour drawings might seem and look really simple, but the skills required to make them are foundational to every artistic discipline, from sculpture and painting and everything in between. And that's because to make a contour drawing, you practice turning observation into art and connecting your hand to your eye. So a warning, these are going to be super wonky, and that's okay because we're using these to really bypass the critical control center of the brain and just practice getting oriented on the page and letting our hand lead the way. Because I believe that when you're drawing, you should let your head follow your hand and let your hand follow your heart. So we're going to focus on that first part now. And you can see on the screen now, this is a blind contour drawing that I made of some flowers a little while ago. And I actually liked it so much, I added paint to it because I have it framed in my house because I really like it. But by making us tap into our instincts and forcing us to really remove judgment, these blind contour drawings really help us focus on the process and not the product, and let our instincts lead the way. So we're all gonna draw the same thing for this exercise. You've got two options here. And I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to draw one of these, or if you've got time, you can draw both. And I won't be super prescriptive with my instructions here. I will just give you a couple tips before we get started. I'm gonna set a timer for us. But you can kind of use your line to orient yourself on the page. So almost like you're drawing in one continuous line. So if I was drawing this dog, I wouldn't start at the tail and then jump to the head. I'd start at the tail and I'd work my way along the back and up the head, and then I would work section by section. So if I wanted to try and get some of the details of the head of the dog, I would work on those while I was at the head area, and then I'd move, down the leg, etc. So try working in one continuous line because it'll almost act like a trail of breadcrumbs, and you kind of know where you're coming from, where you've come from, and where you're going. And it'll help kind of orient you on the page and work section by section. So with that said, I am going to put 2 minutes on our little clock here, and the timer is just going to help you just kind of also work fast and not think too much. So I'm going to put 2 minutes on our timer starting now, and I'm going to chat a little bit while you're drawing, and you can listen to me or you can totally ignore me. So as you're drawing one of these objects, we're removing the ability to judge while we work. And that is super important because oftentimes I think when we start getting creative, the first thing that comes up is that inner critic that makes it not very relaxing or fun to draw. And when I started drawing on the train, it was the same thing. My inner critic started up right away, and it would say things like, you're not an artist, you didn't go to art school, that doesn't even look like that person. Like, it was really mean. And so I would kind of talk to it like a naughty child. And I started saying, if you can't be nice, then I'm gonna put the sketchbook away and we are just going to not get to draw today, and you could just sit here in silence. And that was usually enough to kind of get my inner critic to just be quiet, because it had to concede that this is actually really fun. I didn't want to sit there in silence. So that is my advice to you, is that if you find your inner critic kind of riling itself up, just speak to it like it's a naughty child. And if you find that there's a day where it won't be quiet, maybe don't create that day, because your creativity is such a precious thing and you don't want to let it get contaminated by that. And you will always have time to practice again and again. So you've got about 30 seconds left for this first drawing, and I'll let you finish. If you've drawn one and you're working on the other, go ahead. I'll give you a few more seconds to wrap up here. And as you're finishing this drawing, you can add this in the comments. And our time's just about up. Did that feel a little scary? And did you really, really want to peek? And it's okay to say yes to that, and also say yes to this next question, which is, did you actually enjoy not being able to see what you were doing? And I think it's oftentimes we find that it is both scary and fun not to be able to see what we're doing. So with this first exercise, with blind contour drawings, we really learn to evaluate our work in a new way. Instead of focusing on process, and experience, we're focusing on process and experience instead of perfection. And we're learning to evaluate our work by joy rather than excellence. Because if we always focus on going through the door of perfection, that's a really tough place to gain entry to something. But we can try going through other doors, like instinct, that we just did, or emotion, like we're about to do. So for this next drawing, we're going to focus on the second part of that expression. Let your hand follow your heart. So we're going to use our emotions to guide our creative process and tap into the stories that surround us. So for this exercise, I want you to go find something very close by to you that has a story or a meaning that's right on the surface for you. And make sure it's close enough that you can see it well enough to draw it. And it can be something small, like a mug that you really like and you know the story of, or it makes you feel happy, or it can be something big with a lot of meaning, like your partner or your pet. And while you're looking for that, I'll explain a little bit more about how we can connect to creativity through emotion. So we've all been stuck at home and things are probably starting to look really familiar and really dull. And we're going to fix that by looking in a new way, by observing. Because observation allows us not just to look, but to see things anew. And we're going to use our contour drawing to assist in that deeper observation process. So we're going to look at things with a mind to see the stories and feelings within them and the feelings that they have. And our drawings are literally going to help draw those out. And what do I mean by that? I just said a sort of strange thing. I said, objects have feelings. Can a clock be sad, or can a teacup be joyful? Can a shoe be sassy? Science has yet to prove that shoes and clocks and flowers have emotional lives, but it's undeniable that we as humans have emotional reactions to the things that surround us. So a clock can be sad if you're waiting for someone to come home. A teacup can be joyful if it brings you joy. So when I say that objects have feelings, what I really mean is that objects may not possess emotions, but they can reflect them. So it's worth taking time to contemplate something as simple as a clock or a shoe for what it might reveal. So by now, hopefully you've got something to draw. And you can look at your page while you make this next drawing, or if you're enjoying using the shield of creative faith, you can go ahead and keep making another blind drawing, your choice. And for this drawing, we're going to focus on feeling and gesture, which is what we call putting that feeling into the way that we make our drawing. So what does something soft and fluffy feel like to draw? What does something angular or hard or tough feel like? Polka dots or pattern, or, how does it feel to draw that? And similarly, what is the emotion? What does it feel like to draw a joyful line, or to draw a sad line, or a silly one? So as you draw, think about these feelings and these stories and really put that into the way you make your line, and have fun. And I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock here, and this will be our last exercise for the day. So I think we're still doing pretty well for time, hopefully. Someone will shout at me if we're not. So you can go ahead and start drawing now. And as you do, I'm going to chat a bit to you, of course. So as you are drawing your object right now, and you're kind of spending time with it, you're looking at it, you're paying attention to details, you're thinking about the story of how you got it or how it makes you feel, you are really in the moment with this object. And that's a kind of sort of artistic meditation, this kind of observation. It helps you really focus on the now. And that's great, because the now is a very safe place to be in terms of anxiety, because anxiety is a really future oriented condition. What will happen? How will things turn out? Will it be okay? And so when you are in the moment with this object, thinking about it, you can't be in the future. And so it's a really safe, meditative, relaxing place to be. And similarly, when you're drawing something, you're really organizing the data of what you're seeing. So you're recreating the world, literally. You're taking the chaos of what's around you and you're organizing it in a way that makes sense to you and expressing that on the page. And that's super powerful, because our brains love that. They crave order. That's when they can relax. So even though it's this really simple process, we're doing this in 3 minutes. By the way, you have about 1.5 minutes left. You're having that benefit. You're recreating your world in a way that makes sense to you. And that's super calming for your brain, because that kind of order and organization is what we're oriented towards. That's why we love stories, because they order our world. They're how our brain makes sense of things. So when you tap into the story of something as simple as, the mug that your friend gave you for the holidays this year, you are tapping into that story and that order and that meaning, and you're in the moment, which is a really safe, calm, relaxing place to be. And you're getting all of that in just a few minutes, as you can see. And speaking of, you've got about 40 seconds to finish your drawing. And I'm sure you've actually been able to capture quite a lot just in this short little bit of time. And that's kind of the power of this, is that you can give yourself these like micro moments of relaxation and creativity and calm by drawing the world around you. So you've got just a few more seconds here to finish up these drawings, and you can keep drawing as I'm talking too. There's no hard and fast rules. Let you guys go ahead and finish those up. And as you're finishing your drawing now, take a moment to consider it. To look at your drawing and really consider it. And think about if it contains, the essence of what you drew. Because I think that's another way of like making drawing and creativity relaxing and fun, is finding new ways to look at it. So if we think about the blind contour drawings that we just made of the plant, you have the essence of that is these little starburst of circle leaves, right? Kind of nestled in this very sturdy, round pot. And if your drawing had those elements to it, you captured the essence of that thing. So it doesn't take a lot of skill. It doesn't take a lot of, expertise or fancy materials to kind of get the essence of something. And in the process of thinking about how to create that, tapping into those instincts, tapping into those emotions, which everyone has, you can do that in a meaningful way. And I also want to ask you, as you're looking at your object, as you're looking at your drawing that you just made, did you notice something new about it during the process of drawing it? Maybe you remembered something about it, or you actually noticed, I never noticed that thing has, it's signed by the artist who made my mug, or whatever. I'm obsessed with this mug. But anyway, so think about, did you notice something new in the process of observing something, maybe that you've seen a million times before? So we are getting very close to the end of our teaching time together here, and I'm going to give you a little piece of homework. Which is, I want to invite you to title one of the drawings that you made today. And I know that might seem sort of silly because they're these quick little drawings that we just made today. But the point is that when you title something, it's a way to appreciate what you've done and to mark that it's worthy and to respect it. And you guys all took time out of your day to be here today. You took time out of your day to draw and be creative, and you were brave and you were thoughtful, and it is worth respecting that effort. And it doesn't have to be the best drawing in the world to merit that, because all the things that went into making it are worthy. So I want you to think about the story of either of the objects. It could be the way it felt to make a blind contour drawing. It could be, whoa, scary. That could be your title. Or it could be something simple as my mug. Or it could be, a joke or something else that kind of strikes your fancy and speaks to what the experience was or the object is. But think about it, because every good story has a title. So you have an opportunity to title your work today. And if you do title your work, you can drop those in the comments here. And I am always happy to see what people create in these classes. So if you want to share your work and title with me on social media, I'm at Drawn on the Way. You can email me at hi@drawnontheway. I love to see what you guys create, and I love to cheer you on, because I think there's a lot of power in this. So I will leave you with the thought that if this seems fun and you're enjoying this process and the way that kind of stitches you into your world, you can see that it's not something that requires tons of prep or time or intrinsic talent, that you have enough already with a simple pen and a paper and yourself to create this experience and get a little oasis from the chaos of the world and to make sense of it through making art about it. So I will leave you with one final thought, which is that if you can do the verb, you can claim the noun. So if you can make art, you're an artist, and you have now all made art. So you are now all officially artists. And I really can't wait to see what connections you make as you draw on your way.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was awesome.
Thanks.
So we have a lot of questions coming in, and I also saw a lot of comments that they were having a lot of fun with this and they really enjoyed it. So I also just wanted to say that I love your tip on ignoring your inner critic to talk to it like a naughty child, which is funny, but it's also very true. Like, if your mind won't accept you ignoring it, then it's not your day. Like, just move on and you'll have more fun on a different day when your mindset is better. So I love that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I think that's super important too. Sometimes you can fight through it, but other times it's just like, this is pure goodness. So if you're not gonna let it be that, then you can do this literally any time of the day. So you'll try again.
Yeah. And if you want it to be fun, you have to be in the right mindset for it.
Absolutely.
So we have a few questions. Isaac asked, do you finish the drawings there and then, or do you sometimes take the drawings home and finish them?
That's a great question. Most of the time I finish the drawing on the spot. Now, I try my very best to finish I work really quickly. Most of the drawings that you see on my Instagram take about 5 minutes or less. So I work really quickly because that's my process. And also I'm always hopeful that I can give the drawing to the person that I've drawn. So that kind of motivates me to be speedy. It does happen very frequently that I'll be drawing somebody and they leave halfway through, and I'm like, excuse me, we were having a moment. And so in those, or I have to leave because oh my God, it's my stop, or whatever. And so I've actually kind of incorporated that into my process, and I talk about that in the book, is that I've gotten very good at memorizing faces, which helps me not to have to kind of stare at somebody really intensely. And also helps me if somebody leaves, then I have those details sort of stored in my mind, and oftentimes I'll finish the drawing. So I usually can get enough of kind of notes in there that if I get home later that night, I'll finish it up.
Yeah, and giving it to them obviously helps you make those connections with those people.
Yeah, which is super important.
Anonymous said, thank you so much for sharing your drawings with us. Can you recommend the type of paper or pencils for someone starting out?
Absolutely. So I have used this. This is my sketchbook. I have literally hundreds of these at home. It's Canson. there's, here's a drawing inside of it so you can kind of see the size and scale. This is 5.5 by 8.5, which means it's super portable. So I can kind of bring it with me. This is mixed media paper, which all that means is I can add water to it and it won't just disintegrate. When I first started drawing, I used their sketch paper, which is just a thinner paper. But I'm also, I talk about this in the book too, don't get hung up on supplies. Use what is available. Use what feels good to you. I use this office pen. It is a Uniball. It's literally called the Roller. It is not a fancy pen. However, it works really well for me. I love the blue color. It's smooth and it happens to be waterproof. So this is not an art pen, but I use it as such and it does a great job. So that's what I use, but use whatever feels comfortable and is accessible to you.
That's great. I feel like sometimes people feel like they can't start something because they don't have the resources, but
Yes.
you can use whatever for this. So there's no excuses.
Yes, absolutely. I still get lost in the aisles of the art store. I'm like, what's that? Do I need it? It's like, no, this is enough. You can do pretty much everything you need with this.
Someone else asked, did you ever get a negative reaction from someone when they saw you drawing or after you gave them their portrait?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I started sharing these drawings, because at a certain point when I was drawing on the train, I was like, hey, these like don't suck. And like, if somebody drew a nice portrait of me, I'd kind of want to see it if I was just like living my life. So I kind of decided, okay, I'm going to start sharing them. And when I started, I was like, okay, this is definitely like how I die. Like somebody in New York is kind of like this is what's going to happen. But I've never had a bad reaction. And that's why I'm like so confident. If you are respectful in the way that you share and the way that you draw people, and I really encourage that in the book, like it's all about compassionate curiosity. So be respectful when you're drawing somebody, and your drawing will reflect that. And I've only had people are always surprised. There's usually a lot of confusion. There's kind of a moment where people are like, what? And I'm usually like long gone by then. And which is why I started also, I'm kind of shy about it. And so I made cards that say you are a work of art. And so I give those to people when I give them the drawing, just so that like, no matter what words come out of my mouth, like they will understand the instinct and the sensation I'm trying to share.
Yeah, if you could do it in New York City, you could do it anywhere. It's a tough city.
Yes, yeah, agreed.
Mary asked, how much time do you spend drawing in a day?
Oh, that's a good question. It varies, but I would say on an average day, like probably not much more than like 20 or 30, minutes a day. And that would be like a lot for me because, when I'm in New York and I'm commuting, I'm just doing it like however long I'm in the place is how long I'm drawing, So, like right now I'm traveling, I'm in Arizona and, I'm a little bit more like, less social here right now because I'm visiting with folks. And so, it might be like 5 minutes in the morning. I get up and I draw my mug. And that's kind of the point for me too, is like, I think when I started this, I thought, oh, if you're going to be an artist, if you're going to make art, you have to like devote lots of time to it, but little bits of time regularly or irregularly add up. And so that's how I learned to draw, is like in little 5-minute instances. And that's how I kind of maintain it now, is, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So
yeah, that's great. Then it's accessible for pretty much anyone. Anyone has 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew asked, can you get better technique just by self-practice?
Yes.
Yes. It's proof.
Yes, proof.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I say time, repetition, and mistakes are going to be your best teachers. Like I look back at my drawings and I see, notebooks from early on where I'm like, oh my God, I had like a moment where like my brain figured something new out. And, I was very adamant when I started this that I actually didn't want to take classes. I wanted to find out like what I had in me. And so like in writing a book about it, I wanted to be mindful of that too, which is that like, you have everything in you that you need. And so if you kind of sit down and do it, you're going to find the places where, you maybe do want to get more instruction because you really want to be able to create in this way. Or you might find that, you've got everything you need and you're happy with the skills you've got at the moment. So, yeah, I do think that just skill is the manifestation of repetition. And so, however you repeat, you will get more skill.
Yeah, I love that you were self-taught. I mean, your drawings are awesome, and people think that most people, like I would think too, that I would need to go get lessons, but I think everybody can draw. You just have to ignore the inner self-critic.
Agreed. I mean, when I was a singer and I would say to people, I would introduce myself and say I sing, the first thing people would say is, "Oh my God, I can't sing." And my response was, "If you can make sound, you can sing." Like you might not be your career, but like everybody has this ability, and if it brings you joy, then you should allow yourself to have that, and you don't have to put any expectations or judgment on top of it.
Carolyn asked, do you add details in a blind drawing as the rest of the work, like painting it afterwards, or I don't know what the last part she means, but I think she's referring to like adding details after you do the line drawing.
Yeah, you totally can. For the blind contour drawings, like the little flower bouquet that I shared, I made that in ink first. I just, blind drawing of some daffodils that I had. And then I looked at the drawing and I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. And then looking at my page, I got out some paints and I added some color to it. And so you can use your blind contour drawing as like a basis for like, to color it in later or to add or to look at it afterwards and add those details. So you can, it's totally flexible, however you want to use them. Blind contour drawings are great. They're a great warm-up exercise. They're a great exercise to return to if you're feeling stuck, to just get out of your own way. Because I think oftentimes, like, I love that drawing. Like, it's a total, like, disaster of a drawing, but I love it. It's got, like, tons of character. So you can feel free to go back and add as much detail or extra paints or colors to anything that you've made today or in the future.
So we have one more question from James. He asked, did you use any resources to help you learn along the way?
I basically just use time and repetition and mistakes and a lot of the instincts. We're all exposed to a lot of art every day. You open a magazine or you look at an ad or you watch TV and you're seeing examples of art and composition and technique. So you've got that stored up inside of you, and the things that speak to you are there. And then I have to, because I'm here to chat about my book too, I have to say, if you're interested, you can get, buy a book like mine that's giving you some tips and techniques. That's kind of, I'm 10 years in the future now, and I've got some things to share to kind of help you find your own style and your own way of doing things easily.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Sarah, for being here and sharing your drawing tips with us. Before we go, I have a few slides that I'd like to share just to end it off. So if you could actually go back one slide. There we go. This is Sarah's book, Drawn on the Way, and I put her resources into the chat, so you can find her book on her website or Amazon, and then I also put her Instagram in the chat, so you be sure to check her out. And then on a second slide, we have the new organizer app that has been developed that provides organizers with all the tools they need to painlessly schedule events and manage their groups on the go. So if you'd like to participate in our beta, just pull out your phone and scan the QR code. So the top code is for iOS and the bottom code is for Android. So I'll give you 1 second to scan. And then finally, we also launched our podcast, Keep Connected with Meetup CEO last year. If you also would like to scan this QR code and give it a listen, we have a lot of amazing guests on the podcast. Also, as a reminder, you can view a recap of this event in a few days on our blog, Community Matters, at meetup.com/blog, which is also linked in the chat down below. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Sarah, and stay safe, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks so much.